In forensic science, there are no miracles. There is only data. And the data on Detective Morrison's desk was as close to a miracle as he'd ever seen. A 100% DNA match. A slam dunk, as the DA called it. In a high-profile murder case, the victim, Thomas Vance, 40, a man known for his aggressive business dealings and a pending very public lawsuit against his own stepmother. The cause of death. Multiple stab wounds. The scene. A violent, desperate struggle. The evidence. A significant amount of foreign skin and blood cells found deep under the victim's fingernails, and a clear, partial fingerprint in blood on the handle of the discarded knife. The suspect, Eleanor Vance, 60, a retired schoolteacher. The victim's stepmother. It's open and shut, Morrison said to his partner. We ran her DNA when she filed a restraining order against him last month. It's a 100% match to the skin under his nails. The print on the knife, also hers. Motive? He was trying to get her husband, his father, declared incompetent and seize the entire $90 million estate. She killed him to protect her golden goose, a 60-year-old teacher, his partner mused. You'd be surprised what people will do for $90 million, Morrison said, signing the warrant. Let's go pick her up. The arrest was a quiet, brutal affair. It happened at twilight, in the sterile, hushed atmosphere of the Vance estate in the Vermont hills. The house was less a home than a private luxury hospital. Eleanor Vance, a woman with kind, tired eyes and hair the color of soft silver, was in the middle of her nightly ritual, gently spoon-feeding broth to her husband, Arthur. Arthur Vance, 75, was a prisoner in his own body, silenced by a massive stroke 5 years prior. He was paralyzed, mute, able to communicate only with a slow blink of his eyes. He was Eleanor's entire world. When the officers stepped into the room, their boots echoing on the marble floor, Eleanor's first instinct was confusion. Can I help you, officers? Is everything. Is Thomas okay, ma'am? Morrison said, his voice flat. Are you Eleanor Vance? Yes. You are under arrest for the murder of Thomas Vance. The spoon clattered from Eleanor's hand, spattering broth on the pristine white duvet. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Eleanor didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked, in wide, silent terror. Arthur, strapped into his hydraulic chair, could see. His eyes, the only part of him that could move, darted frantically between his wife and the police. A low, agonizing sound, the only sound he could make, began to emanate from his throat, a choked, desperate groan. He was watching his anchor, his caregiver, his protector, being taken from him, and he was, as he had been for 5 years, utterly powerless. No, wait, Eleanor pleaded, her voice finally breaking as they pulled her toward the door. My husband. He can't be left alone. His nurse doesn't arrive for an hour. Please, you don't understand. He needs me. The state will arrange for his care, ma'am, Morrison said, pulling her gently but firmly into the hallway. The last thing Eleanor saw was Arthur's face, contorted in a mask of silent, screaming rage and terror. The last thing Arthur saw was his wife's face, pale and disappearing into the custody of strangers. In the opulent, silent prison of his mansion, Arthur Vance was, for the first time, completely and truly alone. The news hit the small, affluent community like a bomb. Eleanor Vance, the woman who ran the hospital charity drive, the woman who read to children at the local library. A murderer? It was unthinkable. But the evidence, as the DA leaked to the press, was absolute. The DNA match was 100%. The case was assigned to a burned-out public defender who, upon seeing the DNA report, immediately advised his new client to plead guilty in exchange for a manslaughter charge. But I didn't do it. Her voice echoing in the sterile holding cell. All night. Ma'am, your husband can't speak. He can't testify. He's not an alibi. You are. But your DNA is. The public defender sighed. They have your skin under his nails. That's a struggle. They have your print on the knife. That's the ball game. Take the deal. Eleanor refused. And so, she sat. She sat in a cell, her bail denied due to the severity of the crime and the flight risk her theoretical $90 million inheritance posed. She sat, and she rotted, not from the jail, but from the inside out. Her mind consumed with one image. Arthur, alone, his eyes wide, waiting for a broth that never came. Weeks passed. The legal machine ground forward. The trial date was set. The case was, for all intents and purposes, over, until Dr. Aris Thorne stepped off a plane from Zurich. Aris Thorne, 68 years old, was a man who had earned his retirement. A pioneer in genetic sequencing, he had spent his life in quiet, brilliant academic pursuit. He was sharp, curmudgeonly, and possessed a mind that saw the world not in people, but in patterns. Arthur Vance had been his college roommate, his oldest friend. Eleanor was the woman who had saved Arthur's life with her devotion. He had been on a speaking tour when the arrest happened. He read the news with growing disbelief. He ignored the headlines. He went straight to the court records and read the forensic report. He sat in his hotel room, the report in his hand, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table. 100% match, he said to the empty room. DNA doesn't lie. It's the most honest witness we have. It cannot be bribed, it cannot be intimidated, and it cannot be mistaken. He looked at the report again. Blood type, O negative. DNA profile. 13 marker match. Match to Eleanor Vance. He paused. Skin cells from fingernails. DNA profile, 13 marker match. Match to Eleanor Vance. He stood up and paced the room. So, she did it. She, a 60-year-old teacher, fought a 40-year-old man, overpowered him, and stabbed him to death, leaving her DNA everywhere. It didn't fit. The pattern was wrong. The Eleanor he knew was a woman who cried when she accidentally ran over a squirrel. The DNA doesn't lie, he repeated. So, if the data is correct, then the premise must be wrong. He flew back to Vermont, not as a friend but as an investigator. He bypassed the lawyers. He went straight to the DA, a man named Covington, who was enjoying the high-profile media attention. Dr. Thorne. Covington smiled. A pleasure. I've read your work, but I'm afraid the science here is quite basic. It's a match. It's a beautiful match, Mr. Covington, Aris said, his voice dry. It's perfect. Too perfect. I'm here as a friend of the family. I'm being hired by the defense as a consultant. I need to see her. And I need new samples. Why? We have her DNA on file. You have her blood on file, from the restraining order paperwork. Aris countered. I want a buccal swab. And I want a hair follicle. Root and all. Covington, seeing no harm in it, and perhaps enjoying the chance to show a scientific legend his own ironclad case, agreed. Aris's visit to the jail was a shock. The woman he saw across the glass was not the vibrant, tired but strong Eleanor he knew. She was a ghost. She was thin, her silver hair was lank, and her eyes were hollow. Aris, she whispered, her hands shaking. He's struggling, Eleanor, Aris said, his heart aching. The state-appointed nurse was, by all reports, adequate, but she was not Eleanor. Arthur was refusing to eat. He was, in his own silent way, on a hunger strike. He was dying of a broken heart. You have to get me out, she pleaded, tears welling. I didn't do it. I was with him. I was reading poetry to him. All night. I never left. I know, Eleanor, Aris said, his voice softening. But right now, I need you to trust me. I need to be a scientist, not a friend." He explained what he needed. The cheek swab, the hair. She complied, confused, but desperate. Aris didn't trust the state lab. He pulled in every favor he had and got access to a university genetics lab after hours. He was, technically, retired. This was, technically, highly irregular. He didn't care. He ran the samples himself. He ran the blood sample first. The sequencer hummed. The report spooled out. DNA profile, A. It matched the police file. 13 marker match. Then, he ran the hair follicle. He waited, his stomach in a knot. The machine hummed. The report spooled out. He looked at it, and his blood ran cold. DNA profile, B. It was a completely different sequence. It's impossible. He breathed. He checked his machines. He checked the controls. He ran the sample from the cheek swab. The sequencer churned. The result? A mix. A messy, chaotic report showing both Profile A and Profile B, overlapping, fighting for dominance. One person. Two complete, distinct, separate sets of DNA. He slumped into his chair, the implications washing over him. My God, Eleanor. He remembered a lecture he'd given at Johns Hopkins 20 years ago. A medical curiosity. A 1 in 8 million chance. A tetragametic chimera, he whispered. He realized what it meant. Eleanor Vance, in the first few weeks of gestation, had not been alone in the womb. She had had a twin. A fraternal twin, and in a biological event of staggering rarity. The two embryos had fused, becoming one single organism. Eleanor. A person built from two different blueprints. Her blood, her immune system, had developed from one twin, DNA A. But her skin, her hair, her eyes, had developed from the other twin, DNA B. The police had taken her blood for their files. But the killer, in the struggle, had left behind skin. The DNA matched. But it also didn't match. Aris felt a brief, soaring moment of triumph. He had it. He had the ultimate reasonable doubt. He burst into the DA's office the next morning, slapping the two sequencing reports on his desk. "Mr. Covington," he said, "you have a problem. Your suspect has two sets of DNA. The blood you have on file, DNA A, doesn't match the crime scene. The skin at the crime scene, DNA B, matches her skin, but not her blood. Your 100% match is now a 50/50 hypothesis. It's a scientific train wreck." Covington stared at the reports, his face paling. He saw his perfect case, his media spotlight, his political future, all imploding. He read the reports again, and then a slow, cold smile spread across his face. "Dr. Thorne, you're a genius," Covington said, and Aris's heart sank. "What? You just handed me my case," the DA said, leaning back. "This isn't reasonable doubt. This is the motive. You've just proven, scientifically, that Eleanor Vance is a genetic freak. A person with two identities. Who's to say one of them isn't a killer? That's not how it works. It's not a split personality," Aris stammered. Horrified. "Who cares?" Covington said, his eyes gleaming. "The jury will. You've just given them a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde narrative. You've confirmed her skin was at the scene. You've confirmed her print was on the knife. All you've done, doctor, is explain why this nice old lady was capable of such a brutal attack. One of her twins did it. You haven't freed her. You've just convicted her." Aris stared, speechless. He had walked in with the key, and had instead handed the prosecutor the sword. He had, in his arrogance, just failed his oldest friend. He had failed Arthur. He walked out of the DA's office in a daze. The trial was in 3 days. Covington was already amending his opening statement. Aris was the prosecution's new star witness. He went to his hotel. He was beaten. He had looked at the data, but he hadn't seen the story. He sat for hours. The DNA doesn't lie. The DNA told him she was two people. DNA A, blood, and DNA B, skin. And the crime scene was 100% DNA B. He had been so focused on the science of the chimera, he had missed the logic. "Wait," he said aloud. "The DNA B is from a fraternal twin. A twin that was absorbed." His mind raced. What if it wasn't? What if the fusion wasn't complete? What if? He scrambled for his computer. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a detective. He was a geneticist. He went back to the only thing he trusted. The data. Birth records. State of Vermont. 1960. He searched for Vance. Eleanor. Nothing. Her maiden name. Roanoke. Eleanor. He found it. Born. October 3rd. Street. Mary's Hospital. Birth weight. 5 pounds 2 ounces. Mother. Sarah Roanoke. Father. He kept digging. He wasn't looking for Eleanor anymore. He was looking for a ghost. He searched the hospital's adoption records for the same day. October 3rd, 1960. And there it was. Baby girl Roanoke. Weight, 5 pounds, 4 ounces. Placed in custody of the state. Adopted. November 1st, 1960. Adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Harris. They hadn't fused. They had been born. Two separate, identical human beings. No, not identical. Fraternal. Aris realized his initial theory was wrong. It wasn't just chimera. It was something else. He ran back to his lab data. He looked at Eleanor's DNA B from the hair and her DNA A from the blood. He ran a comparison. They were wildly different. "It's not chimera at all," he breathed. It's contamination." He looked at the lab report from the jail. The nurse who had taken Eleanor's blood sample for the restraining order. Her name was on the form. Nurse J. Harris. He ran a search. J. Harris. Janet Harris. He found her. A woman of 60. A nurse. Adopted. Her birth name. Baby girl Roanoke. Aris felt the world tilt. Eleanor didn't have 2 sets of DNA. The police file had 2 sets of DNA. The nurse, Jane Harris, was Eleanor's fraternal twin sister, the one who had been given up for adoption. And when she had taken Eleanor's blood sample a month ago, in a moment of what? Curiosity? Spite? She had, somehow, accidentally or intentionally, contaminated the sample. She had pricked Eleanor's finger, then, perhaps, pricked her own to check the glucometer. A drop of her own blood, DNA B. The sample in the police database was a mix. This meant the killer, the person who left DNA B under Thomas's fingernails, was not Eleanor at all. It was Nurse Jane Harris. Aris now had the real story. Jane, the adopted twin, had tracked her biological sister. She had watched Eleanor, a woman who had it all, the mansion, the money, the devoted, if paralyzed, husband. And she watched as Thomas, the greedy son, tried to destroy it all. Jane, who had a history of violent outbursts and 2 prior arrests for assault, had decided to protect the sister she had never met. She had gone to Thomas's house. She had confronted him. She had killed him. She hadn't known about the DNA file. She hadn't known she was, genetically, a phantom. She had simply killed a man, and in doing so, had perfectly, and accidentally, framed her long-lost sister. The courtroom was packed. Covington, the DA, was in the middle of his thunderous opening statement, painting Eleanor as a 2-faced genetic monster, a Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde. "The science is absolute," he declared. Her skin, her true self, DNA B, was at that scene. "Objection," Aris Thorne said, standing up. He was not a lawyer, But he was the defense's only expert. The prosecution is basing his entire case on a false premise. And I can prove it. What followed was not a legal argument. It was a science lecture. Aris, on the stand, dismantled the state's case, piece by piece. "Your Honor," he said, addressing the judge, "the state's file is contaminated. It contains two distinct DNA profiles. DNA A, which belongs to my friend, Eleanor Vance, and DNA B," the judge asked. "And DNA B," Aris said, "which the prosecution claims is also Eleanor Vance, but is, in fact, her fraternal twin sister." A bomb went off in the courtroom. Eleanor gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "I present," Aris said, projecting the birth records. "The birth certificate for Eleanor Roanoke, and the adoption record, from the same day, for baby girl Roanoke, who became Janet, or Jane Harris, the very nurse who collected the blood sample the state is using as its baseline." Covington was on his feet, sputtering. This is theater. It's conjecture." "Is it?" Aris said, his voice cold. "Then let's test it. Let's test it right now. I ask the court to order a new, clean, observed DNA sample from Mrs. Vance. A blood draw. Right here. And compare it to the DNA B at the crime scene. They will not match. Because the killer, the real killer." The DA saw his case, his career, his $90 million headline evaporate. The judge looked at Covington. "Well, Mr. Covington, do you wish to proceed based on evidence you now have reason to believe is fundamentally contaminated? Or do you wish to dismiss?" Covington, his face the color of ash, stood. "Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Eleanor Vance." The reunion was silent. There were no cameras. Aris had driven Eleanor directly from the courthouse to the mansion, walking her back into the hushed atmosphere of the sick room. Arthur was in his chair, by the window. He looked smaller, frailer. His eyes were closed. The state-appointed nurse had left. "Arthur!" Eleanor whispered, her voice thick. Arthur's eyes snapped open. He saw her. His Eleanor. She rushed to him, falling to her knees, pressing her tear-streaked face into his unmoving hand. "I'm here," she sobbed. "I'm home. I'm so sorry. I'm home, my love." He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. But Aris, watching from the doorway, saw the single tear that escaped Arthur's eye, rolling down his paralyzed cheek. It was enough. The police, armed with the new data, went to arrest Jane Harris. But she was gone. Her apartment was empty. She had seen the news. She had vanished, a genetic ghost, back into the world. Eleanor Vance never got the $90 million. Arthur, heartbroken and weakened by the ordeal, passed away 2 months later. But he passed away in his own bed, his hand in hers, with Eleanor reading poetry to him, just as she had on the night the nightmare began. Ella Scroll, freed from a crime she didn't commit and a future she didn't want, sold the great, cold mansion. She kept only the poetry books and one photograph of Arthur. When he was young and laughing, Dr. Aris Thorne went back to Zurich. He had not sought justice, not really. He had just sought the truth. The data, he knew, had never lied. It had just been telling a much, much better story than anyone had been smart enough to read.
If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to support the channel so we can create more videos. Thank you, everyone.